I learned to trust my axe before I trusted my courage. An axe is a simple thing. It has a haft, a head, and an edge. It does not doubt. It does not feel fear. It only feels the strength of the arm that swings it and the resistance of whatever it strikes. For a grunt of the Horde, whose life is measured in the span between one battle and the next, that simplicity is a comfort. My courage, however, was a more complicated thing. It was forged in the red dust of Duroder, tempered in the fires of duty, and tested in the shadow of a war chief who promised us everything and nearly cost us our soul. Before the iron fist of Garrosh Hellscream closed around the heart of the Horde, life in Orgrimmar had a rhythm. It was a harsh rhythm, to be sure, dictated by the unforgiving sun and the constant need for vigilance. But it was our rhythm. In the Valley of Strength, the air was always thick with the smells of the forge, hot metal, quenching steam, and the sharp tang of coal smoke. The great anvil of the weaponsmiths rang day and night, a steady percussion that was the city's very heartbeat. I was part of that rhythm, a small, nameless piece of the great machine of the Horde. My days were spent in the training grounds, the circle of dust and sweat where we learned the 100 ways an axe could end a life and 1,000 ways a shield could preserve one. My barracks were rough-hewn, smelling of oiled leather, unwashed wool, and the faint, coppery scent of old blood that never quite left the floorboards. I shared the space with a dozen other grunts, orcs mostly, but a few trolls who had come south from the Echo Isles, and even a Tauren whose quiet presence seemed to fill the entire room. We were a unit, a family bound not by blood, but by a shared oath. Our commander was a veteran of the Third War, an old warsong warrior named Gortok, whose face was a roadmap of scars. He was hard as granite, but his eyes held a flicker of the old ways. The honor that Thrall had taught us was the true strength of the Horde. Gortok spoke often of balance, of fighting for survival, not for conquest. His words were a balm against the growing heat of the new Warchiefs rhetoric. Garrosh Hellscream was a firestorm. When Thrall named him war chief, a wave of fierce, primal pride had swept through the younger generation of orcs. We were born in the shadow of shame, raised on stories of demonic corruption and internment camps. Garrosh was different. He was the son of Grommash, the hero who had broken our chains. He spoke not of diplomacy or coexistence, but of strength, of destiny, of an Orcish horde that would take its rightful place as the masters of Kalimdor. His voice was a war drum, and in my youth, I felt its beat in my blood. Orgrimmar began to change under his command. The rough, practical architecture of Thrall's time was torn down, replaced by towering fortifications of black iron, spiked and menacing. The city no longer looked like a sanctuary. It looked like a weapon aimed at the heart of the world. I remember standing on the ramparts overlooking the northern barrens, my hand resting on the worn leather grip of my axe. The sun beat down, turning the metal of my pauldrons into branding irons. Beside me stood Borak, an older grunt who had seen more campaigns than I had years. He had fought alongside Thrall in the founding of Duroder and carried a quiet cynicism that often grated against my youthful fire. He spat a wad of tobacco juice over the edge, the dark spittle vanishing into the haze. "See that?" he grunted, gesturing with his chin towards the valley below. "That's our home. Thrall built it as a refuge, a place to live in peace." He squinted at the new iron towers clawing at the sky. "This new war chief, he's not building a home. He's building a cage, and he's sharpening the bars." I did not understand him then. I saw only strength. I saw the Korkrone Guard, Hellscream's elite, marching through the streets with a discipline and ferocity we had not seen in years. Their armor was immaculate, their axes honed to a razor's edge. They were the embodiment of Orcish might, and I admired them. I craved that certainty, that unwavering purpose. To serve the war chief, to fight for the glory of the Horde. What higher calling was there for a warrior? The whispers of the elders, the concerned glances of the Tauren, the quiet withdrawal of the Darkspear trolls. I dismissed it all as weakness. They did not understand. Garrosh was making us strong again. He was washing away the stain of our past with the promise of a glorious, blood-soaked future. Our days settled into a new, harsher routine. Training was no longer about defense and tactics. It was about aggression, about overwhelming force. Gortok drilled us until our muscles screamed and our hands were slick with blisters. A shield is not just for you, he would roar, his voice cracking like a whip. It is for the brother standing next to you. You hold the line not for glory, but for the survival of the clan. But the new training manuals that came down from Hellscream's command told a different story. They spoke of shock troops, of breaking enemy morale through sheer brutality. The shield was secondary, the axe was primary. The goal was not to hold the line, but to obliterate it. One evening, after a grueling day of drills, Borak and I sat by a small fire near the barracks. He was carving a piece of wood with a small, sharp knife, his gnarled fingers surprisingly deft. He was shaping it into a small wolf, its head thrown back in a silent howl. "My father taught me this," he said, not looking at me. He said a warrior must know how to create as well as destroy. It keeps the soul balanced. He held the finished carving up to the firelight, its tiny wooden form seeming to hold a deep sadness. There is little balance in this city anymore. Only the forge, only the axe. The shamans grow quiet. The spirits of the land are displeased. I scoffed, a sound of youthful arrogance. The spirits will be pleased when the Horde is victorious, old one. Garrosh understands what Thrall forgot. This world respects only strength. Borak sighed, a deep, weary sound. He tucked the wolf into a pouch at his belt. Strength without wisdom is just a hammer, boy. And a hammer sees everything as a nail. There is honor in a well-aimed blow. There is none in smashing everything in your path just because you can. He looked me in the eye, his gaze heavy with a sorrow I could not yet comprehend. Remember that, Korgel. When the orders come down and the blood is hot, remember that true strength is knowing when not to strike. His words were a seed of doubt planted in the hard soil of my certainty. It would be a long time before it took root. For now, I was a soldier of the Horde, and the Warchiefs drum was the only music I heard. The summons came on a morning choked with dust and the promise of blistering heat. A horn, deep and resonant, echoed from the heights of Gromash Hold. It was not the familiar call to muster. This one had a different tone, sharper, more urgent. It cut through the morning clamor of the city, silencing the forges and the market chatter. Grunts poured from the barracks, buckling on armor and grabbing weapons. We formed up in the central square, a sea of green and brown flesh, of iron and leather. The sun glinted off 1,000 axe heads. Above us, on the balcony of the hold, stood a figure I recognized as one of Hellscream's high-ranking commanders, a hulking brute named Makarok. He was not an orc we knew. He was from the Blackrock clan, one of Garrosh's hand-picked enforcers. Makarok did not speak of honor or survival. His words were fire and steel. He spoke of the Alliance as a disease, a creeping weakness that had infested Kalimdor for too long. He spoke of the night elves in a Shenvale, calling them vermin hiding in the trees, hoarding resources that rightfully belonged to the Horde. He pointed south toward the Stonetala Mountains and spoke of a great offensive, a final push to claim the lumber or we needed to fuel our war machine. "For too long, we have asked," he roared, his voice amplified by some goblin device. "For too long, we have negotiated. Today we take, by the will of Warchief Hellscream. We will carve a new destiny for the Horde from the heart of this land. We will show our enemies the meaning of true strength." A roar went up from the assembled crowd, a wave of sound that shook the very stones. It was a sound of bloodlust, of pent-up aggression finally given a target. I felt it too, the surge of adrenaline, the primal call to battle. This was what we were trained for. This was our purpose. We were the fist of the Horde, and we were about to strike. But as I raised my own axe and joined the cheer, I caught Gortok's eye. Our old commander stood off to the side, his arms crossed over his chest, his face grim. He did not cheer. He watched the frenzy with a look of profound disappointment, and in that moment, Borak's words about the hammer and the nail echoed in my mind. We were issued new equipment. The leather straps were stiffer, the iron plates thicker and darker. My old shield, A simple round of wood and banded iron that had served me well was replaced by a heavy, spiked buckler designed more for punching than for blocking. My axe, a balanced weapon I had come to know as an extension of my own arm, was exchanged for a heavier, more brutish cleaver. It felt clumsy in my hands, its weight all in the head, designed for one purpose, to shatter. There was no finesse to it, no balance. It was a tool of pure destruction. As I hefted it, I felt a strange disconnect. This was not the weapon of a warrior. It was the tool of an executioner. The oath was different this time. We were gathered before a dark shrine, erected to the memory of Grommash Hellscream. We were made to kneel, and a Corcrone overseer walked down the lines, anointing our foreheads with a mixture of ash and blood. He did not ask us to swear loyalty to the Horde, to our brothers and sisters in arms. He made us swear a single, binding oath. I pledge my axe, my blood, and my life to the true war chief, Garrosh Hellscream. We recited, our voices a low rumble. His word is my law. His enemies are my enemies. His victory is my destiny. Strength and honor. But the word honor felt hollow, an afterthought tacked onto a pledge of blind obedience. As I spoke the words, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. I was no longer a soldier of the Horde. I was a soldier of Garrosh. The march south began within hours. We were a river of iron and muscle, flowing out of the gates of Orgrimmar and into the sun-scorched plains of the northern barrens. The dust kicked up by thousands of boots created a brown cloud that followed us like a shroud. The mood was high at first. The younger grunts sang war songs and boasted of the elven heads they would take. They sharpened their new blades on the march, the screech of whetstone on steel a constant, unnerving chorus. I marched beside Borak, who remained silent, his eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting an attack at any moment. They're like pups, eager for their first kill, he muttered, his voice low. They do not know what they are marching into. We are marching to victory, I said, my voice betraying more confidence than I felt. My new axe felt heavy and alien on my back. Borak shook his head slowly. We are marching into a war of our own making, Korgal. Thrall fought for a home. Garrosh fights for an empire. An empire is built on bones, and the bones of your enemy look no different from your own when they are buried in the mud. He pulled out his water skin and took a long drink, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Just keep your eyes open. Watch what they ask you to do, and ask yourself if it is the work of a warrior or the work of a butcher. Our journey took us through the crossroads, a dusty hub of trade and weary travelers. The tower guards of the watchtowers regarded our passing column with expressions of deep unease. Their stoic faces were unreadable, but their eyes followed the black iron banners of Hellscream's army with a silent disapproval that was more powerful than any shouted protest. They gave us water and supplies, as was their duty, but there was no warmth, no kinship. We were allies, but it was clear they did not see their horde in our grim procession. They saw something else, something darker, and it troubled them. It troubled me too, though I would not have admitted it. We left the familiar red earth of the barrens behind and entered the contested lands of Ashenvale. The change was immediate and profound. The oppressive heat gave way to a cool, damp twilight beneath the canopy of ancient trees. The air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, was a relief after the choking dust of our homeland. But this was enemy territory. The beauty of the forest was deceptive, its shadows filled with unseen dangers. The night elves were masters of this terrain, and we were clumsy, noisy invaders. The boisterous songs of the young grunts died on their lips, replaced by a tense silence, broken only by the tramp of our boots and the clank of our armor. The orders from our new commander, a grim-faced Corcrone named Gardoch, were simple and brutal. We are not here to occupy, he bellowed at our first encampment. We are here to clear. Every tree that can be used for lumber is to be felled. Every elf that stands in our way is to be cut down. We will bleed this forest dry and salt the earth behind us. This land will fuel the Horde's victory, or it will be a monument to our wrath. There was no talk of strategic objectives, of securing supply lines, of honor. There was only the command to destroy. We were not an army. We were a plague of locusts in iron armor. Our first clash was not the glorious battle I had imagined. It was a bloody, chaotic skirmish in a logging camp. We were tasked with protecting a team of goblin shredders as they tore into the ancient trees. The night elves did not meet us in open combat. They struck from the shadows, a flurry of arrows from unseen archers, a ghostly sentinel swooping down from the canopy. They were fighting to protect their home, their faces masks of desperate fury. Our response was a wave of brute force. We charged, axes swinging, roaring Hellscream's name. We were clumsy, predictable, but we were numerous. We overwhelmed them not with skill, but with sheer, relentless aggression. I found myself face to face with a sentinel, a woman with violet skin and silver hair. Her eyes burned with a cold, ancient hatred. She was swift, her glaive a spinning circle of death. She moved like a dancer, while I felt like a lumbering beast. My heavy cleaver was too slow. I could only use it to parry, the impacts jarring my arm to the shoulder. She was tiring me, wearing me down. Then, from my right, another grunt charged, his axe raised high. He was young, barely more than a boy, his face a mask of terrified rage. The sentinel turned to face him, and in that split second of distraction, my training took over. I lunged, not with the cleaver, but with the spiked buckler on my other arm. I drove it into her side. I felt the crunch of ribs, and she gasped, her eyes wide with shock and pain. She fell to her knees, the glaive clattering on the forest floor. She looked up at me, not with hatred now, but with a kind of weary resignation. The young grunt I had saved stood over her, his axe trembling in his hands, ready to deliver the final blow. No, I heard myself say, the word a harsh croak. I pushed him back. The fight is over. I looked down at the wounded elf. We were supposed to kill them all. That was the order. But staring into her eyes, I saw not a monster, not a vermin, but a warrior defending her home, just as I would defend mine. Gortok's words echoed in my ears. A shield is for the brother next to you. I had used mine to injure, to create an opening for a kill. It felt wrong. Before I could decide what to do, Garrosh, our commander, strode over. He saw the kneeling elf, saw my hesitation. His lip curled in a sneer. What is this, grunt? A moment of weakness. Without another word, he drew his own massive axe and brought it down in a single, brutal motion. The act was so swift, so casual, it stole the breath from my lungs. He wiped his blade on the grass and glared at me. There is no weakness in Hellscream's horde. There is only victory. Remember that. He turned and walked away, shouting orders for the advance to continue. The young grunt I had saved looked at me, his eyes wide, then back at the body on the ground. He turned and vomited into a bush. I stood frozen, my hand still gripping the handle of my buckler, the phantom feeling of breaking bones still tingling in my arm. This was not honor. This was slaughter. The seed of doubt, planted by Borok so long ago, had finally begun to sprout. We pushed deeper into the mountains, leaving a trail of stumps and churned mud in our wake. The land itself seemed to cry out against our invasion. The air grew heavy, and a perpetual gloom clung to us, a gloom that had nothing to do with the dense forest canopy. The skirmishes grew more frequent, more desperate. We were no longer just fighting sentinels. We fought druids who took the form of great bears and claws of the night, their rage a tangible force of nature. We fought against the land itself, as roots erupted from the ground to trip our soldiers and thorny vines snaked out to ensnare them. The shamans among our ranks tried to commune with the elements, to ask for their aid, but they found only silence. The spirits of this place had turned their faces from us. Morale began to fray. The initial bloodlust and excitement curdled into a grim, sullen slog. The constant, unseen attacks wore on our nerves. At night, the forest was alive with sounds, the hoot of an owl, the snap of a twig, and every sound could mean an incoming arrow. The young grunts who had sung so loudly on the march now huddled close to the fire, their eyes darting nervously into the shadows. The wounded were many, and the healers, priests and shamans alike, were overworked and exhausted. Their healing magics seemed weaker here, as if the land itself rejected their power. We were an infection, and the world was trying to purge us. One evening, we made camp in a small, desecrated clearing that had once been a night elf shrine. The moonstones were shattered, the small wooden totems hacked to pieces. A young Tauren in our unit, a quiet spirit walker named Bane, named for the chieftain he so admired, knelt by the ruins, his head bowed. He was trying to soothe the wounded earth, to offer an apology to the spirits we had offended. I watched him, his large, gentle hands tracing the patterns on a broken stone. He was a follower of the Earth Mother, and this wanton destruction was a deep wound to his soul. Garrosh saw him. The Core Crone commander strode over, his heavy boots crushing fallen leaves and sacred herbs. "What are you doing, cow?" he snarled. Bane looked up, his wide, brown eyes filled with a sad patience. "I'm trying to quiet the land, Commander. Its anger slows our progress." The spirits Garrosh cut him off with a backhanded blow that sent the young Tauren sprawling. "The spirits are weak. The Earth Mother is weak. The only power that matters is the iron will of the Warchief." He kicked at the shattered moonstone. "This is the fate of all who are weak. They will be broken and their lands will be taken. Now get back to your duties before I decide you are as useless as these trinkets." Bane rose slowly, a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. He did not look at Garrosh with anger, but with a profound pity. He simply nodded and walked away, his shoulders slumped. The other Tauren in our force watched this exchange in stony silence, their faces unreadable, but their hands tightened on the halves of their totems. A rift was forming within our own ranks, a chasm between those who followed Hellscream's path of conquest without question, and those who still clung to the old ways of the Horde. I stood with Borak, watching the scene unfold. "The hammer," Borak murmured, so low only I could hear. "It has found another nail." The true test came when we reached the heart of the Stonedalin Mountains. Our objective was a place called the Thaldara Grove, a school where young night elf druids were trained. Our intelligence reports, likely exaggerated to stoke our fury, called it a military academy where shapeshifters were taught to become living weapons. We were ordered to assault and destroy it. The plan was not a conventional siege. Our new commander, a replacement for Garrosh who had been promoted for his ruthlessness, was an orc named Cromgar. He was a zealot, a true believer in Garrosh's vision, and he had been entrusted with a new weapon. It was a goblin bomb, not a small satchel charge, but a massive device, a metal behemoth hauled on a reinforced wagon, pulsating with a sickly green light. The goblin engineers who accompanied it cackled with glee as they armed it, their eyes wide with a manic love for destruction. Cromgar gathered the officers, myself among them as a squad leader now, and laid out his plan. We were not to engage the grove directly. We were to clear a path to a high cliff overlooking the settlement. From there, the bomb would be dropped. It would, in his words, cleanse the entire valley with fire. A deathly silence fell over the command tent. Even the most hardened veterans looked uneasy. This was not war. This was mass execution. A troll shadow hunter, a veteran of many campaigns, finally spoke, his voice a low rasp. "Commander," he said, choosing his words carefully, "this is not the way of the Horde. There is no honor in this. The Warchief himself speaks of glorious combat, of Makara." Cromgar's eyes blazed with fury. "Honor," he spat. "Honor is victory. The Warchief demands this valley, and I will give it to him. Do you question his will? Do you question me?" The troll fell silent, but his dissent hung in the air like smoke. Later, Borak found me sharpening my cleaver, a pointless task as I had no intention of using it. My hands were shaking. "You see it now, don't you, Korgal?" he said quietly. I didn't have to ask what he meant. "This is madness," I whispered. "They are children, students. Even if some are warriors, many are not. This is a war crime." Borak finished for me, his voice flat. "It is the work of butchers, not warriors. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" I looked at my hands, at the calluses formed from years of holding an axe. I was a grunt, a soldier. My duty was to follow orders. But what was my duty when the orders themselves were a betrayal of everything I believed the Horde stood for? "We can't disobey a direct order," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Cromgar would have us executed on the spot." Borak nodded grimly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps enough of us feel the same way. The Tauren are on the edge of open mutiny. The trolls are sharpening their knives for reasons other than battle. Even some of the orcs, the older ones who remember Thrall, they look at that bomb and they see the same sickness that Fellblood brought upon our race." He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "A choice is coming, Korgal. You'll have to decide if you are a soldier of Hellscream or a warrior of the Horde. They're no longer the same thing." The following morning, we marched. The air was thick with unspoken tension. The goblin sappers pushed the great bomb up the winding path, their chatter and laughter a jarring contrast to the grim silence of the soldiers who guarded them. We met resistance, of course. Elven archers harried our flanks, and druids in bare form threw themselves at our lines in suicidal charges, trying desperately to reach the bomb. We fought them off, our movements mechanical, our hearts heavy. Each elf we cut down felt less like a victory and more like a tragedy. We were killing the guards of a schoolhouse. We reached the overlook as the sun began to set. Below us, nestled in the valley, was the Thaldara Grove. It was not a fortress. It was a collection of beautiful, elegant buildings woven into the living trees. We could see figures moving about, their forms small and indistinct at this distance. There was no sign of a massed army, no fortifications. It was a place of learning, of peace, and we were about to annihilate it. The goblin chief sapper gave Cromgar a thumbs up. The bomb was armed and ready. Cromgar stood on the edge of the cliff, a monstrous silhouette against the dying light. He raised his hand to give a signal. This was the moment, the choice. I looked at Borak. He met my gaze and gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He was not going to let this happen. My heart hammered against my ribs. To defy a commander in the field was treason. The punishment was death. But to stand by and watch this atrocity felt like a different kind of death, a death of the soul. Before Cromgar's hand could fall, a voice, deep and resonant as the earth itself, called out, "This is not the way of honor." "Commander," it was Bane, the young Tauren. He had stepped forward, along with every other Tauren in our force. They stood together, a silent, immovable wall of brown fur and righteous certainty. They held no weapons, but their presence was more formidable than any army. "The Earth Mother weeps for what you are about to do," Bane said, his voice calm but unwavering. "We will not be a part of it." Cromgar spun around, his face purple with rage. "Treason! You dare defy me? You dare defy the Warchiefs' will." He drew his axe. "I will make an example of you all. Korkrone to me. Cut down these traitors." The Korkrone guards loyal to him moved to obey, their own axes raised. But then something else happened. Borak stepped forward, and then I did. And then the two Darkspear trolls. And then a handful of other orcs, older veterans who had seen enough senseless slaughter. We formed a line between the Korkrone and the Tauren, our own weapons drawn, not in aggression, but in defense. The army had fractured. Brother stood against brother, on the edge of a cliff, with a weapon of mass destruction ticking beside us. The bomb was a grotesque monument to our division. Its green light pulsed like a diseased heart, casting sickly shadows on our faces. Below, in the valley, the unsuspecting students of the grove went about their evening rituals, unaware of the judgment that hung over them. Cromgar's face was a mask of disbelief and fury. He had lost control. His force was split, and a fight amongst ourselves would achieve nothing but our own destruction. He hesitated, his eyes darting between the defiant Tauren, the grim-faced veterans, and the loyal Korkrone. The standoff was absolute, a frozen tableau of honor against obedience. And then, from the sky, a sound, a rhythmic whirring that grew steadily louder. A goblin zeppelin descended from the clouds, bearing the black and red standard of the war chief. It landed heavily nearby, and from it strode a figure that made every orc, loyalist, and dissenter alike snap to attention. Garrosh Hellscream himself had arrived. He was a mountain of muscle and rage, clad in the plate of his father, the great axe, Gorehowl, strapped to his back. His eyes, small and fierce, swept over the scene, taking in the bomb, the divided soldiers, the defiant Tauren. His gaze was like a physical weight. Cromgar rushed to him, saluting sloppily. "Warchief, I was just carrying out your orders. We have the target in our sights, but these traitors interfered." He pointed a trembling finger at Bane and the rest of us. Garrosh did not look at us. His eyes were fixed on the bomb. He walked over to it, placing a hand on its metal casing. He could feel the volatile energies pulsing within. He then looked down into the valley at the peaceful grove. For a long moment, he said nothing. The only sound was the wind whistling over the mountaintop and the hum of the bomb. When he finally spoke, his voice was deceptively quiet, a low growl that held more menace than any shout. "What is this, Cromgar?" he asked, his gaze still on the valley. "This is our victory, Warchief," Cromgar said, his voice filled with a desperate, eager pride. "A decisive blow against the Alliance. We will wipe them from this mountain in a single, glorious moment." Garrosh turned his head slowly, and his eyes finally fell upon his commander. "You would use such a weapon," he said, his voice laced with contempt, "on a school of children and scholars? You would drop this filth on them from a cliff, like a coward dropping a rock on a rabbit?" Cromgar's pride faltered, replaced by confusion. "But, Warchief, I did it for you, for the Horde, to secure this land." Garrosh took a step towards him, his shadow falling over the smaller orc. "You did this for your own glory," he snarled. "There is no honor in this. There is no strength. This is the weapon of a weakling, of a creature so pathetic it cannot face its enemy on the field of battle. You have disgraced my name. You have disgraced the Horde." He pointed to the valley. "Victory is won in the clash of steel, in the roar of a warrior's challenge. It is won with an axe in your hand and your enemy's eyes before you. This is a stay in my heart's sword." He understood. Garrosh, for all his bluster and aggression, understood the meaning of honor. Borak had been wrong. I had been wrong to doubt him. The Warchief was a true warrior. But what happened next shattered that illusion forever. Garrosh grabbed Cromgar by the throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. "I will not have my horde led by cowards," he roared, and with a single, powerful motion, he hurled Cromgar from the cliff's edge. The commander's scream was cut short by the sickening crunch of his impact far below. Garrosh then turned to the rest of us, his face a thundercloud. "Disarm that abomination," he commanded, gesturing at the bomb. "And let this be a lesson to all of you. We will win this war. We will take this land. But we will do it as warriors, not as vermin." He turned and strode back to his zeppelin without another word. As it ascended, I looked at Borak, a grin spreading across my face. "He did it," I said. "He chose honor." Borak did not share my relief. His face was as grim as ever. He looked down at the spot where Cromgar had stood, then at the peaceful valley below, and then back at me. "Did he, Korgal?" he asked, his voice heavy. "He didn't punish him for wanting to slaughter civilians. He punished him for the way he chose to do it. He didn't object to the murder, only to the lack of glory in it. He still wants the valley. He still wants them dead. He just wants their blood on our axes, not on a bomb." The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. The hope that had flared in my chest died, leaving behind a cold, hard knot of dread. Garrosh hadn't saved us from committing an atrocity. He had simply insisted we commit it in a more personal, more honorable fashion. He was not a guardian of our soul. He was merely its chief executioner, and he demanded we look our victim in the eye. The rift in the Horde was not between honor and dishonor. It was between two different, but equally monstrous, definitions of the word. We packed our gear and marched back down the mountain, leaving the disarmed bomb behind like a tombstone. We had not won a moral victory. We had only been given a different set of savage orders. The war was not over. It had just become more intimate. The aftermath of Stonedalin was a quiet, festering wound. We were redeployed, our unit broken up and scattered among other legions. The official report stated that Commander Cromgar had died in a tactical misstep and that our objective had been reassessed. It was a lie, a neat and tidy bandage over a gangrenous injury. But we who had been there knew the truth. We had seen the Warchiefs' true face. It was not the face of a hero, nor the face of a monster. It was something far more terrifying. The face of a zealot who had twisted the very concept of honor into a weapon of conquest. I was sent to a garrison in the southern barrens, a place of simmering conflict and old hatreds. The days were long and monotonous, filled with patrols along the border of Alliance territory. We fought skirmishes with human footmen from Northwatch Hold, but there was no fire in it anymore. It was a grim, joyless duty. I would clean my axe after every fight, the water running red in the bucket, and I would see the face of the sentinel I had helped kill, the shock and pain in her eyes. I saw the shattered moonstones of the elven shrine. I saw Cromgar's body tumbling into the abyss. The glory of battle was gone, replaced by a weary sickness. Borak was sent to a different outpost, and I saw him only rarely. When we did speak, the words were few. We shared a skin of grog by a low fire, the stars of the barrens a cold, indifferent canopy above us. We did not need to speak of what we had seen. It was a shared burden, a shadow that clung to both of us. "They are building more war machines in Orgrimmar," he told me one night, his voice a low rumble. "Bigger ones. The goblins are working day and night. The war chief is preparing for something massive. He will not be satisfied with a Shinvale or Stonedalin. He wants it all." The news from the wider world was grim. We heard whispers of the campaign in Northrend, of Garrosh's arrogance and his clashes with the other Horde leaders. We heard of his contempt for Vol'jin, his dismissal of Sylvanas, his barely concealed disdain for the Tauren. He was isolating himself, surrounding himself only with those orcs who shared his vision of a pure Horde. The Horde I had pledged my life to, the diverse coalition of survivors that Thrall had built, was being dismantled from within. It was being reforged into a monolith of Orcish supremacy, and those who did not fit the mold were being cast aside. The young Tauren, Bane, I never saw him again. I heard he had left the army, returning to Thunderbluff. I cannot blame him. His spirit was not made for this new Horde. His courage was the courage of conviction, of peace, of life. Garrosh's Horde had no place for such courage. It demanded only the courage of the axe, the courage to kill without question. I often wondered if that was courage at all, or just a form of madness. Years seemed to pass in the dust of the barrens. The sun rose and set, the seasons turned, but the war ground on. Then came the discovery of Pandaria, a new continent shrouded in mist. The Warchiefs saw it not as a land of wonder and wisdom, but as a new wellspring of resources to fuel his war machine. The full might of the Horde was turned upon this new land, and the stories that trickled back were more disturbing than ever. They spoke of a dark energy beneath the soil, the Shah, manifestations of negative emotion. They said that Garrosh's war was feeding these creatures, that our own hatred and anger were literally poisoning the land and giving birth to monsters. I was finally recalled to Orgrimmar. The city was almost unrecognizable. The black iron fortresses were even larger, their spiked towers seeming to tear at the sky. Core-crone elites were everywhere, their presence oppressive. They were the law now, answering only to Garrosh. The other races of the Horde were treated with open suspicion. I saw a Darkspear troll being beaten in an alley by two Core-crone for no other reason than being a troll. I saw a Tauren family being evicted from their home in the Drag to make way for a new barracks. The Valley of Strength was no longer a place of honorable training. It was a staging ground for a brutal, internal occupation. The cage Borak had spoken of all those years ago had been completed, and we were all trapped inside it. The breaking point came with the news of Theramore. We heard that a great victory had been won, that Jaina Proudmoore's city had been destroyed. But then we heard how a mana bomb, a weapon of such devastating power that it had not only obliterated the city, but had twisted the very fabric of reality in the surrounding area. It was Cromgar's bomb multiplied 1,000-fold. It was the ultimate act of cowardice and dishonor, the very thing Garrosh had executed as commander for considering on a smaller scale. The hypocrisy was so staggering, so absolute, that it broke something inside me. The last vestiges of my loyalty to the office of War Chief, my belief that Garrosh could be redeemed, crumbled to dust. He did not care about honor. He only cared about winning, and any principle could be sacrificed for that goal. I found Borak in a dimly lit tavern in the Valley of Spirits, a place the Core Crone rarely bothered to patrol. He looked older, his face etched with deeper lines of weariness. I sat down opposite him, and he slid a mug of ale towards me. "You heard, then," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak. He used the focusing iris from the blue dragonflight. Borak continued, his voice a low, bitter whisper. "He tricked them. He lied to them. He used our own soldiers, good soldiers, as bait to draw the Alliance defenders into the city, then dropped the bomb on everyone, his own troops included. He sacrificed them for a bigger victory." The ale soured in my stomach. To sacrifice your own warriors, to use them as pawns in a dishonorable trap, it was the ultimate betrayal. A commander's first duty is to his soldiers. Garrosh had spat on that sacred trust. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice raw. "We cannot live under this thing. He has made a mockery of everything we are." Borak took a long drink from his mug, his eyes scanning the other patrons of the tavern. He leaned forward, his voice barely audible. "There are others who feel as you do. The Darkspear have been exiled from a city. Vol'jin has declared open rebellion. He calls for all true sons and daughters of the Horde to stand with him, to take back our home." A fire I had not felt in years kindled in my chest. It was not the hot, reckless fire of bloodlust, but the clear, steady flame of purpose. A rebellion. A chance to fight for something that mattered again. Not for conquest, not for a tyrant's ambition, but for the very soul of the Horde. "Where?" I asked. "How?" Borak smiled, a rare and welcome sight. It was a grim smile, but it held a spark of hope. "Be patient," he said. "Listen, the whispers are everywhere. In the alleys, in the barracks, in the quiet places where the Core Crone cannot hear. A storm is gathering, Korgal, and when it breaks, it will wash this city clean." In the weeks that followed, I learned to live a double life. By day, I was a loyal grunt, performing my duties, my face a mask of stoic obedience. I patrolled the walls, I trained in the yard, I followed the orders of Garrosh's sycophantic officers. But by night, I was a conspirator. I met with Borak and others in secret. We were a motley collection, orcs who remembered the wisdom of Thrall, trolls loyal to their shadow hunter chieftain, Tauren who could no longer stomach the desecration of the world. We were few at first, but our numbers grew. We were the quiet dissent, the seeds of rebellion taking root in the cracked earth of Garrosh's tyranny. We shared information, we smuggled weapons and supplies out of the city, we made contact with Vol'jin's forces in the Echo Isles. Every secret meeting was a risk, every whispered word a potential death sentence. The paranoia in Orgrimmar was palpable. The Core Crone arrested anyone suspected of disloyalty. Public executions became a common sight in the Valley of Strength, a brutal warning to any who would dare to question the War Chief. But fear could not kill our resolve. It only hardened it. We were fighting for our home, and we would not be intimidated. One night, we gathered in a hidden cellar beneath an old tannery. The air was thick with the smell of chemicals and cured hides. Borak stood before our small group, a reclaimed Horde banner clutched in his hand. It was the old banner, the one from Thrall's time, its red field not yet darkened by the black iron of Hellscream's reign. "The time is coming," he said, his voice ringing with a conviction I had never heard from him before. Vol'jin marche. The Alliance, united by their own grief and anger, marches with him. Soon, they will be at the gates of Orgrimmar. We will be the tip of the spear, the ones who open the way from within. He looked at each of us in turn, his gaze lingering on mine. This will be the hardest fight of our lives. We will be fighting our own brothers, orcs who are not evil, but are simply misguided, blinded by the false promises of a tyrant. There will be no glory in this, only grim necessity. We do this not for vengeance, but for redemption. We do this to save the Horde from itself. He held up the banner. Tonight, we renew our oath, not to a war chief, but to the Horde itself, to the family we have built, to the ideals of honor and unity that Thrall founded this nation upon. For the Horde. A chorus of voices, low but firm, echoed his words. For the Horde. I placed my hand on the hilt of my axe, the same heavy cleaver the first had been issued so long ago. It felt different in my hand now. It was no longer the clumsy tool of a butcher. It was an instrument of liberation. My oath was not a shouted pledge in a crowded square. It was a silent promise, made in the dark, in the company of true brothers and sisters. I would not fight for glory. I would not fight for conquest. I would fight for the grunt who had vomited in the bushes of a Shenvale, for the quiet courage of Bane, for the wisdom in Gortok's eyes, for the cynical hope of Borak. I would fight for the soul of my people. The siege, when it came, was a nightmare of fire and steel. Brother against brother, clan against clan. The sounds of battle within the walls of my own city were a symphony of damnation. I did not revel in it. Every blow I struck, every parry I made, was a painful necessity. I saw faces I recognized from the barracks, from the training grounds, and their eyes were filled with the same confused rage and betrayal that had once filled my own. They were not my enemies. The true enemy sat on his throne in Grommash Hold, barricaded behind his iron walls and his lies. I fought alongside Borak, our shields locked together, a bulwark against the tide of the deluded. We held a gatehouse, allowing Vol'jin's rebels and the Alliance forces to pour into the city. A Core-Crone champion, a beast of an orc in black plate, charged our position, his massive two-handed axe a blur of motion. He smashed through the shields of two of our comrades, his roar of "For Hellscream," a testament to his blind faith. He came for me, his axe raised for a killing blow. I braced myself, knowing my shield would not hold. But then Borak was there, his own body thrown in the way. The Core-Crone's axe crunched deep into his shoulder, a mortal wound. Borak grunted, a sound of agony and effort, but he did not fall. He drove his own axe into the champion's leg, hobbling him. The momentary opening was all I needed. My cleaver, the weapon I had once hated, sang through the air. The blow was true. The champion fell. I rushed to Borak's side, lowering him to the ground. The wound was terrible, blood pulsing from between the plates of his armor. "The gate is open," he gasped, a bloody smile on his lips. Therethrough his eyes began to glaze over. "You see, Korgal," he whispered, his voice fading. True strength, knowing when to strike, and why his hand fell limp. The old cynic had died a hero, for a cause he truly believed in. I knelt there for a moment, amidst the chaos and the shouting, the reek of blood and fellfire from the warlock's quarter. I placed my hand on Borak's chest. He had given me a gift more valuable than any weapon: clarity. He had taught me that honor was not about following orders, but about following your conscience. It was not about how you killed, but about what you were willing to die to protect. I took the small wooden wool from his pouch, its form smooth and worn. I would carry it for him. I rose, my grief a cold, hard stone in my gut. I hefted my axe. The fight was not over. The tyrant still had to be brought down. I looked out from the gatehouse at the city, tearing itself apart. This was the cost of our blindness, the price of our pride. We had followed a monster because he told us what we wanted to hear, because he promised us a strength we were too afraid to build for ourselves. We had let the hammer fall, and it had shattered our own house. But a house can be rebuilt. A family can be mended. An honor that is broken can be reforged, stronger than before. My axe was forged to defend the Horde. Now, I would use it to save her. Tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after, I would help rebuild.